Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a lovely long weekend. It was great sunshine out there. Welcome again to Reboot Your Business Through Your Business Development Plan 2020. My name is Michael Bozany, and I'm delighted to be here with you today, joined by a wonderful team from Griffith College, Dublin, Cork, and Limerick. As always, we welcome your feedback and we invite you to interact with the hashtag Reboot20 through social media channels and follow Griffith online. We have a great lineup for you today. Just to say as well, thank you so much for the emails that some of you have sent in so far. We really appreciate that. This series is for small businesses like yourselves. It's designed for you. We are looking to provide practical resource for you throughout this challenging time. We are getting through and change is in the air. We want to say as well, that the resources will be available to you on the website. Give us a day or two to upload them, and there will be also the videos available shortly after. So at the moment on the website, we have the workbook, which you might have seen. This is a practical resource for you to use throughout the series, and it invites you to basically jot down your thoughts during the series in terms of what ideas you have, how you'd use them in your business, and what you want to develop. The purpose of this is for your business development plan. So with that said, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Geraldine McGinn to introduce today's speakers, and then we welcome your questions throughout. Please feel free to interact through the Q&A button on your screen.
Good morning everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. In our last session, we started by looking at your development plan and looking at how each of us fits into the business. Where is our place? What are we good at? What support do we need? And so today we continue with the development process and look at the factors that influence change. Some changes can be good for your business. It makes us stand back and look at what we're doing. Can we do things better? Can we improve on what we're doing? Is there a better way to do what I do? So with the plan for opening up again in place, I'd really encourage you to use your workbook to jot down some thoughts that you may hear today from today's session that you might be able to apply to your own business. So something might prompt you to think about some element that you can use. So to help us along, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Aidan Murphy of Galway Hooker Craft Beer to this session. The industry that he represents is really changing, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have done and how you have reacted and acted in the changing times. I'm sure it will support viewers to try and think about what they can do when they're looking at their business. I'm also delighted to welcome Kevin O'Hara. Kevin is a lecturer at Griffith, and he is year head for the Griffith BABS program, the BA in Business Studies. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you both and hand it over to you, Aidan, to take it from there. Thank you.
Morning. Hope you can all hear me. And thanks for inviting me on today. So I'm on the brewery floor in Galway Hooker. As you can see, very very quiet at the moment, unfortunately, but hopefully just temporarily. Anyway, thank you again for inviting me in. I hope you had a nice weekend. I think today you've asked me to kind of discuss what are the drivers of change, I suppose, in the drinks industry, particularly in the craft beer industry, which I suppose is the area I'm involved in. So change is certainly nothing new in the drinks industry. You know, the pace of change has really been accelerating over the last few years. So, you know, this current crisis brings change, but again, that's not something that's new to us. We set up Galway Hooker in 2006, and although that is only just over a decade ago, in truth, it could well have been the Middle Ages in terms of how much things have changed. So back then, I think there were around 6 craft breweries in the country, and today there are, I think, 70 plus craft breweries. So obviously that's a seismic change, you know, a total revolution in the craft beer, or just in the beer industry, really. You know, so it's been a really exciting time. You know, a lot of new breweries coming out with really good, innovative beers, and you know, I think that the quality of beers in Ireland now are as good as anywhere else in the world. So I think a good way to illustrate the change that's happened over the time is to tell you, you know, my experience at beer festivals. When we started attending beer festivals 10, 15 years ago, you know, people used to come up to us, and we were pretty much always asked the same question. The question was, what beer do you have that tastes like, you know, Carlsberg or Heineken or some kind of mainstream beer? So we'd have to explain, you know, we didn't really have those types of beers. That wasn't the type of thing we do, and go through the whole explanation about craft beer and why it was different, etc. These days, when we attend beer festivals, we always get asked the same question, but this time the question is, what do you have that's new? You know, what's different? And if they've tried that before or something similar, they're not really that interested. So I really think that just demonstrates the complete, you know, revolution in terms of consumer thinking. So given all this change and the explosion in craft breweries, etc., you know, it might come as a surprise to hear that craft beer only accounts for approximately 3% of total beer consumption in Ireland. So although in one sense there's been a massive revolution, in another, you know, the market is still completely dominated by a handful of international, multinational brewers. But you know, it's 3% higher than it was a few years ago. So it's growing, and it's growing in the right direction. And you know, there's no reason to think that won't change. That you know, that the growth won't continue. If we look at, for example, the US, craft beer makes up around 15% of the market there. And in certain states, it even makes up as high as 50% of total beer sales. So we've a long way to go in Ireland, and I think that we will continue on that road with craft beer taking more and more of the beer market. In terms of what are the actual drivers of change in the drinks industry, you know, I think they're complex and multifaceted. But I think in terms of craft beer, I think you know, that came about, I think primarily because of the complete concentration in the beer market, the complete control and the lack of diversity that was out there, you know, say 10, 15, 20 years ago. Obviously, if you walked in, you know, if you're old enough to remember walking into a bar, you know, 20 years ago, you'll know that every bar in the country had the same 4 or 5 mainstream offerings, and there was absolutely no diversity. So as people traveled, as they, you know, experienced new styles of beer, you know, new brands in different countries, they started to want something similar when they came back to Ireland. And so then the first craft breweries started opening up, and they produced more beer, more choice. And as people tried those new beers, it drove further demand. So it almost became a virtuous circle. I suppose the other big driver of change in the drinks industry is something that's happened to revolutionize all aspects of life and business, you know, over the last, you know, again, 20 years, which would be obviously the advent of the internet, you know, social media, those kinds of things, which has, of course, now allowed small independent breweries to communicate directly with existing or potential customers, to tell their story, to you know, let people know about new products they're bringing out, events, etc. So again, that wasn't something that was possible in the past, but you know, obviously with these developments, it is. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you know, there's been a huge amount of change over the past few decades, and change is nothing new, are anything to be feared. So what is the impact of COVID-19 in terms of, change, which was happening anyway? I suppose from our perspective, I suppose there's two ways, we would look at it. That's kind of, I suppose, the short or the immediate impact from this, which of course, would be the sudden closure of all the pubs and restaurants. So just to put it in context for us, the on-trade would have made up around 80% of our turnover. So we lost that overnight. Now, I guess we're lucky in that we still have 20%, but as you can see, it's very quiet in here today. Normally this would be a bustling, busy brewery, but we still have 20% of our turnover. We still have the opportunity to sell through on-trade food, so pubs, through off licenses and supermarkets, etc. So our focus obviously now is to try and grow and consolidate our position in those markets. We've had to change our plans. So there were certain beers that we were planning to bring out on draft, so they now will be redirected towards cans or bottles and directed to the off-trade. So that is the short-term focus, and obviously, a big focus on maintaining our balance sheet, trying to preserve cash, trying to make sure that we remain viable, and in a healthy position to resume business, at full throttle when eventually things open up again. We don't know when the pubs and restaurants are going to reopen. Obviously, there's been a bit of news over the weekend that might happen a little bit earlier than anticipated, and that would be great if it does. But again, in what capacity, we just don't know. If pubs and restaurants are operating at 20% or 30% capacity, it's hard to know if that's viable. But that's just the short-term kind of focus to just keep our heads above water, and keep the business running. I suppose in the longer term, things, when this pandemic passes, things obviously will return to normal. Pubs will reopen, and restaurants will reopen at full capacity, and we want to make sure that we're there. And we're there to help and assist and partner with those pubs and restaurants when they do, because it is obviously a symbiotic relationship. Our health depends on their health, and I think as a small business, we tend generally to be dealing with other small businesses. So the pubs and restaurants are by and large independently owned small businesses, so we kind of understand each other's struggle, and I think that allows us to kind of empathize and to be there and help, and that's really our big focus. We just want to make sure that we're part of the solution, that we want to be there hand in hand with everyone when things kick off again. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the impact of this pandemic. How will it change behavior? People who used to go out and meet their friends for a drink, will they now stay at home more often, drink and meet through Zoom? We know there's been an upsurge in demand for cooking and baking appliances. Does that mean people will stay at home and cook more often rather than going out to restaurants? People are used to working at home now. Does that mean people will now be working at home, maybe 2 or 3 days a week in the future? So perhaps they'll be working at home on a Friday. What does that mean in terms of Friday night drinks that used to happen? So there's lots of questions about what the world will look like when this crisis passes. And the truth is, we don't know. But what's also true is things were changing anyway. So all this will have done is possibly accelerate things. And I also believe it also possibly could act as an impediment to change. So change that would have happened may not now change because of it may not happen because of this. So for example, you know, there were a lot of, as I discussed earlier, lots of new breweries coming on stream, producing new beers, disrupting the market. You know, maybe some of those newer ones won't survive, won't come through, or maybe people who were planning previously to open up and breweries or other small businesses perhaps won't. So these are all the sorts of things that might mean that you know, change that would have happened won't now happen. You know, also I suppose, you know, a concern maybe craft brewers would have is that when the pubs do reopen, they may not be in as strong a financial position as they were when they closed. And then the multinational brewers may come in and offer some sort of financial support. But in return for that support, the publican will sign an exclusivity deal, which would then preclude craft brewers from accessing these accounts. So again, that would certainly be a concern we would have. So they're just kind of some of the general things we will be worried about. Obviously, the economy, you know, the shape of the recovery, is it going to be U-shaped, V-shaped, is it going to happen, is concern everyone has. Obviously, any sort of recession has an impact on pubs and restaurants, and but the truth is we just don't know. No one knows at this stage. So look at, you know, I suppose all I could just say really, you know, to finish up is, you know, our focus is to maintain as strong a balance sheet as we can, maintain cash, stay close to our customers, you know, maybe look at new avenues, new products online. You know, I suppose we're looking at doing maybe an online shop, but really it's about preparing for the future and staying strong in the present. So I think that's kind of pretty much all I have to say at the moment. So I might hand you back over to, I think, is it Kevin at this stage?
Hi, welcome to everybody. I'm just going to share a screen here. That was really interesting, Aidan. It's fantastic to get those insights from real life business. So I'll just share a screen with you guys. So welcome today. Just to go through, I suppose, just to provide a bit more broader perspective. That's brilliant to get those insights, and it's fantastic. I just want to bring it into the broader perspective because we have a whole host of people, I believe, on this program, from the one-man operation, one-woman operation, to the bigger, you know, some in B2B, some in B2C. So I want to distill out some points and some objectives from today's session. The first is like, welcome to everyone, first of all. And moving on to COVID-19, we know that this has been a massive challenge. This is not a typical environment, but every crisis in the history of humanity occurs and will pass. So this will pass, and it will be a new reality. So we're actually starting to move past the shock phase. We've been in this stun phase, like the rabbit in the headlights. I think we're moving into stabilization to a certain extent. There's a little bit of assurance given in terms of when we're opening up various industries. At least it's something we can, now we don't know, there's always imponderables, there's always potential for us to have to pull back from that a little bit. So we'll factor that in a moment when we talk about contingencies. Moving on to national supports, we obviously in the previous session, Dennis and the other speakers would have gone through the different supports available. Bear those in mind: the wage subsidies, the restart grants, the LEO initiatives, the local enterprise stuff, and SME lending. That's hopefully going to be the fuel that drives us forward as well. I know it's not as straightforward as that, but I think if we can stabilize the cash flow, we can then, as I say, get the balance right between the tactical, which is maintaining the cash flow throughout our initiatives, to get that stability, but also to get growth. Why? Because we want, we want growth as well. Okay, so we have to bear in mind that this crisis is an opportunity to earn the trust and credibility. This is actually, it's a negative. We know it's a negative. It's a massive disruption, but there will be a bit of a shakeout in some industries. Are we positioned to take advantage, to move a little bit more towards digital, to get closer to our customer, to move towards assuring our customers? I know it's not ideal, but there will be that upsurge in the next couple of maybe 6 to 12 to 18 months. Are we ready to take those advantages? And we look at our internal resources perhaps in the next session. So just to give you an example there of of a company who has done well and has done a pivot, because this is really about pivoting, whether it's an incremental pivot or a radical pivot. As Aidan talked about, there was radical change in the brewing industry, but there's going to be another pivot to the on-trade and to different innovation perhaps in the industry. Let's look at Le Patissier in Dublin. They're doing really, really well at the moment. They had massive change. They closed down their business overnight. Like that was seen to be like to close down overnight, but to build an e-commerce site within 48 hours. And now having B2C deliveries of over 400 a week. That is, to me, an impressive example of how we can all do this. And they've used Instagram and the virality of the news. Those ones, like for example, they were voted top 12 boxes on RTE or on the Irish Times. I think if you use social media to catapult your business, we're looking for good news stories at the moment. People want positivity. We're fed up with the negativity. I think if we can grasp our market, our channels, we will go a long way. And there's many, many examples of companies doing this. That's just a good one there of a company that really radically kind of changed itself. Obviously, just get some principles out of the way. I think this is really important. Give yourself time. There's big decisions. You know, we make better decisions when we have more information. Like 2 weeks ago, you know, we know so much more now than we did 2 weeks ago about how things are going to pan out. So while we're saying plan, the act of planning is the valuable thing, as Eisenhower said. The plan itself isn't the thing. It's the awareness of competitors and the bigger picture. That's really important. And there is a value in that. You know, obviously, I think we really have an opportunity to reapply and rediscover that early startup mentality. That's what got you guys into the position of being where you are. I think that's a massive asset resource to have. Let's go back to that. If we go back to that, we can reinvent ourselves. I'm assured of that we have the capabilities, but we can reach out as well when we feel things have changed a little bit. Let's reach out. Let's outsource. Let's get a freelancer in. We don't have to do everything ourselves. There are advantages with the new business climate in terms of the digital world we live in. So I think it's really important to tap into that. We have done it before. Keep calm. We've dealt with these challenges before. We will deal with them again. We will get through it in a slightly different way, perhaps, but in a slightly different revenue, cash, profit stream. Yes. So when we come up with our plan, we're going to need scenarios. We could have a scenario of a scenario A is a more positive, where COVID doesn't reappear. Scenario B is a more staggered approach, and scenario C is maybe a slightly more negative approach. But those scenarios could be useful. So if it does happen, Tesco are a simple example of this. Tesco have been in a very good position because Dave Lewis, the CEO, made those scenarios. People thought he was being overcautious. He actually put forward a massive emergency plan about 3 years ago. He did a whole role play exercise, a bit like a military maneuver. So I'm not saying we need to go that deep, but just in case, it's not a bad idea. Let's look at cash. Cash is the fuel. Preserve it. Cash, as we know, that's going to fuel your business. Let's get those supports and let's fuel growth with it. Let's spend wisely, but let's monitor, obviously, our outgoings as well. Very important, figure out our customer needs. We're going to look at this. Customer needs have changed. We're going to see this a little bit later in the presentation. I've got a few slides. I will make all these slides available, by the way. Don't worry, you don't have to take notes. I'm going to give them to Geraldine. They'll be there for you. Don't worry about making notes. Just obviously, your customer needs are going to be really important. Assurance and trust is now considered the #1 driver. So it doesn't matter if it's a B2B or a B2C, because of online security with B2B or B2C in terms of COVID. That is essential. People will shop where they feel safe to shop or to enjoy or to experience anything. And all businesses will need to pivot to that new reality of trust and assurance. Peace of mind is going to be so important. Yes, you need consistency and value for money and responsiveness, but really trust and assurance. Communicate. I think there's really a good principle. Communicate, to be clear all along the way. Bring people with you on your journey. I think Aidan mentioned that. Work with the small. If it's another small business, there should be that rapport. If it's the multiples, the big operators, the big multinationals, you can work with them too. I think there's there is a significant amount of goodwill out there at the moment to help people along. Let's bring that in the community, and I'm going to focus on community a little bit later. But community, I think, is really important now. I think this could be the time to go local, to harness all that. That might be the new driver of change, which we're going to look at. Okay, so just to give you some toolkits, okay? And we'll explain these a little bit over the next few minutes. What are the key drivers of change? Aidan touched on them. We'll just touch on them briefly as well. They will be dealt with again tomorrow. Specifically, you can apply to your region. If it's Cork, if it's Tipperary, if it's Galway, if it's Dublin, wherever you are, the picture might be slightly different. We look at that. The sector might be different. I'm online, I'm national, I'm actually international, with your consultancy service or your music school, whatever it may be. What's the extent of change needed? We mentioned evolution, revolution. Aidan mentioned it there. That's going to be important. We're going to look at that. Maybe a small pivot, continual small steps might be sufficient. Look at my current business model. Does that need adapting in terms of my cost revenue, my value chain, which is those little activities? Mark will touch on that tomorrow, Mark Dowling. That's going to be a big focus. So we just need to a little bit go into it today. Memorable customer experience. People remark. We want your business to be remarkable, especially with social media. I had a great experience. I felt really assured with their delivery service. It was, we know at Amazon and all these businesses, it's really, really important to get that memorable experience. The customer still is the king. Do I need to add new services and new markets? Perhaps. New segments, perhaps innovation. I'm going to mention innovation and experimentation just a little bit. And then relationships, definitely inside the business and outside. I think that's going to be important. And the final thing is just about your own leadership, checking in on yourself, being aware of your own strengths and weaknesses, which came up last week. There's so many tools out there now to do courses online, to just take one specific module. Let's say you believe digital marketing is the way to go. You're not really sure about it. Just take one module from perhaps Griffith College where we work, but also perhaps an online academy, for example. There's so many online academies, Harvard University, Cornell University, just with one module, or get one of your staff to take a module, over the next, and most of them, a lot of them are technically free, or you can build up towards what's called a mini degree. There are options for us here, don't get me wrong, for my own leadership and for my team. Just very quickly to go through, what are the external drivers of change? There's many of them, guys. We will look at this tomorrow. I just pulled one of them there from the PwC report, which I am making available as a link later. Their Consumer Insights report. People will pay a premium for sustainable and ethical products. That's become massive now. People want assurance where that food produce is coming from. Is it local? Is it transparent? That's one thing now. I haven't met anyone who said, I can't wait to go back shopping. That's why, but I have met so many people who said they value nature now. They value their walks in nature. They value community a little bit more. They value the peace that brings. Do you get me? And I think that people are going to, the studies have initially showed up that 50% people are more likely to take into account what I call sustainable, which can be everything from local to suppliers to the origins of your coffee that you're supplying, or the raw materials in your beer production for Aidan. Quickly going through some of them, some of those drivers without going too detailed. The economic climate is definitely one. Is it a V-shaped or a U-shaped recession? We just don't know at the moment. Therefore, we must be agile to respond to that. If it's deeper, we go with that. Let's game that out, as they say in America, a little bit. Lasting change in societal habits, well-being, shopping trends, assurance, we've just mentioned. Society is going to be different. To what extent, we just don't know. A lot of this stuff was happening anyway. The environmental stuff, societal habits, online, mobile, this stuff was happening anyway, really. Flexible working, we're going to have to manage our team abroad if we have a team, online. Get that work-life balance so people are actually enjoying spending more time with their kids, more time to jog and run. So factor that into you're managing a team, to factor that in. But also even in consumers, well-being, and that is really, really important now. That's going to be really big. Obviously, technology, you can't get away from it. Digital business, ICT, mobile, cloud services. We don't need to have the IT experts. We can use the cloud. We can use software services such as HubSpot to do our relationship marketing with our clients. It is there for us. We live in that connected world now, which can be a big advantage. Just going back to sustainability, that's obviously, I believe this could be the year of local, emphasize those local credentials. Ask yourself, am I fixed for this new driver? Because I think that it has to be the new way, I think, because we've seen now that the global element of life might be pivoting back a little bit towards a more local focus. There are loads of demographic shifts the guys will mention tomorrow, aging population, even a rebalancing of Ireland towards the regions. I'm seeing a shift probably away from the bigger cities, perhaps maybe people can live in the smaller towns again because they don't need to always be in the city, perhaps. Or, you know, maybe a slightly less Dublin focus and more rebalancing to the regions, combined with the national government plans to redevelop. Like, I'm from Waterford City, you know, to redevelop these plans. We're waiting, you know, it's been a long journey, but, you know, I think eventually it just has to happen. That we've seen Cork on a massive resurgence in the last couple of years. Just look outside Kent Station in Cork and you'll see a skyline there that you won't even see in Dublin. So, you know, there is a rebalancing happening. How are we positioned? Yes, there are challenges in the retail sector. We know that. So there's some links there, guys, for you, like trend watching. You can look at trends in a post-corona world. There's plenty there to look at. Just a little bit I've just put up there about domestic tourism. I think as people are waiting to explode to get back into the domestic tourism market due to COVID. That should be a boon for local towns and local businesses. Are we positioned, if you're in the service sector, for example, in the retail sector or in the hospitality, are we ready for that? You know, or that's just one example. Just one or two more slides. I'm going to get Aidan back in again. What's the extent of change that we need? You know, is it revolution or revolution? Revolution happened before for Aidan. You know, maybe for your business, is it more evolution that's needed? Is it slower steps, what we call incremental change? You know, it could be lots of little changes. That Kaizen Japanese philosophy lead to big. We don't always have to make the big leap. It'll be different for some people. Some of us are going to massively pivot from one to the next. Others, it might be a more subtle change. You know, a friend of mine who runs a marketing consultancy was running, obviously his clients, they said, look, we've maxed out our marketing budget. But he realized they're spending a lot more on training and development of staff. So he suggested we can market your brand, we can market your employer brand, your internal, your HR activities, so your talent management. So he pivoted from, you know, external marketing to internal marketing, which was very, very clever. And it was an incremental change and led to a new business for his marketing communications company. So it can be sometimes a subtle, it doesn't always have to be a radical shift. I'd like this idea. So maybe something for you to do, write a list of 12 things that you can do in the next 12 months. You know, start a blog, host an online event, because maybe the physical event to replace that physical event. Try a rebranding exercise, rebranding your logos, rebranding, you know, maybe test something on your website. Does it work? You know, but do it in a safe environment, perhaps. Get a focus group there. You know, you don't have to, it's not to be exposed to the world, but I think, you know, incremental change, you know, through small steps, big changes can happen. That Chinese philosophy of long-termism, that, yes, it's a crisis, but that might be sufficient for some of us. Other people, especially if we've already gone, our revenues have dipped and we're coming back from the cycle. So I like the idea of keep it, kill it, or adapt it. If it doesn't work, don't worry. Pull it after a couple of days. Pull the idea of that adaptation to your website. That, you know, that changing of, you might try something to read some new delivery service or some new B2B facility. If it doesn't work, just kill it. Just get rid of it. Obviously, you need a vision. Where are you going to be in the next couple of years? You know, and then you need your unique value proposition. Where are you positioned in the eyes of the consumer? What unique value are you going to do? And from that, we can put forward some objectives where we can bridge this. We had Padraig O'Cady from Air Aaron on the Griffith program last week online, and he was saying it's about get that bridge to where I need to be. When he ran Air Aaron, you know, he had a vision of getting through the crisis, which was the volcano back in 2010. But you know, it's you need the steps, that bridge to get you there. But the unique value proposition will be, you know, a key thing. I'm going to come back to Aidan now in a second, just to put the unique value proposition in there. Let's just focus on that for a second. What do you do really well? What your competitor does really well, and what your customer needs and what they require. If you can be in there with your competitor doesn't fully have, and you excel in that, what is the source of your advantage? You need to, that's your unique value proposition, sometimes called a USP, depends on it. And it's maybe the steps inside your business. It's the way you rearrange your activities that gives you that low cost or that customized feel, or that just the empathetic service, okay? And that level of consistency in your coffee blends. For example, I was reading about Badger and Dodo Coffee in Fermoy and Cork. It's their level of consistency and their quality of their origin that gets them you know, to have those relationships with coffee shops. So let's look at, maybe I'm going to come back to Aidan now, to maybe come in on, feel free to, if you, Aidan, would like to talk about maybe the unique value proposition and the vision, and maybe other elements that I've touched on, and the evolutionary aspect of.
Thanks, Kevin. That was very interesting. Yeah, there's a lot in that. So yeah, just going through some of the points you made. Well, I suppose certainly as someone who's you know, been running a small business for 15 years, I would really strongly encourage people to liaise with their local enterprise board, or you know, if they're in a rural setting, leader, whatever government agencies are available to them, because you know, they really are excellent. We've received a lot of support from those agencies over the years, so certainly I would encourage anyone to do that. The quote, "A crisis is an opportunity to earn the trust and credibility of your customers and suppliers and community," I'd certainly go along with that in terms of, you know, I think it's really important to maintain good relations with all of your customers, your suppliers at the moment, because you know, this is the time when people will remember how you treated them. This is, you know, if you were fair and decent with people now, it'll be remembered, and if you weren't, that will also be remembered. So really, it's to do that. You know, you touched on, you know, you think this could be the year of the local, that people will support local. Hope you're right. I think they will too. I think I suppose this crisis will hopefully bring our community closer together, and I think there's a lot of evidence already that that people do want to do that, and you can see even locally, for example, or a coffee shop, which the coffee shop near our house, which, you know, I'm a regular customer of, reopened recently after being closed for a few weeks, and I think everyone was very excited to see it open again, and maybe you have to lose something before you appreciate the value of it. So I think people do now appreciate, well, hopefully, you know, even more appreciate the work that goes into running a small business, and I hope that people will continue to support local and small businesses more than ever, and I think they will. So give yourself time over big decisions. I agree with that. Be calm, definitely. This is, you know, an unprecedented, scary crisis, but anyone who's been in business a while has been through lots of crises of one sort or another, and I think you just have, you know, you learn to take them on the chin. It's scary, but you have to remain calm. You have to remain confident and continue believing, and you know, if you do that, you know, and work towards a solution, there's no reason to think you won't come out the other side. So be prepared to adapt, pivot, refine a plan. Absolutely. I think you touched on you said something about keep it, kill it, or adapt it. That's definitely good advice. Again, we've been around 15 years. We've produced a lot of beers over those years, and I can tell you not all of them were successful. So that's fine. You know, we don't mind making beers that are flops, you know, as long as we get a few good ones in the middle, a few gems. So it's to, you know, keep at it, keep producing, innovating, creating new products, and not being afraid to fail. But the real key thing is just to get it out there. Again, you touched on building relationships like that. I just keep re-emphasizing that point, how important that is. So you touched on sustainability, and again, I suppose, you know, small and local feeds in nicely to that. Obviously, as a small brewery, you know, I suppose one of our USPs is that if you go for a beer in, you know, or more in Galway, you know, the guy pulling the pint can go, well, the beer was brewed, 500 meters that way. The brewer dropped it in himself this morning, and I know exactly how the beer is made because I visited the brewery several times and saw the process. So all of that kind of keeping it human, keeping it small and local, and that's the advantage any small business has over their bigger rivals. There will hopefully be an upsurge in domestic tourism, but obviously presumably we'll be losing international tourists for some time. So that's a challenge for us all. It does maybe mean that we have to adapt our products to serve say an Irish tourist opposed to an international tourist. So if you're, for example, a souvenir shop, you probably aren't going to sell too many Shamrock cups to Irish tourists, but there may be something else you can sell instead. In terms of innovation and change, and I suppose finding there's I suppose, say for example, from something that a craft brewer could do. It's not something we're doing at the moment, but it's like, I suppose options we could look at would be, for example, some sort of vertical integration. So perhaps to look into opening up a pub. It's not really something we're really looking to do, but it's something other breweries have done, or possibly get into contract brewing, which would give you another kind of revenue stream where you just produce the beer, but you sell it to someone else, and they create their own brand and sell it on. So that that's an option we could look at. And I think I touched on earlier the possibility of maybe looking at online sales for alcohol, which is a little bit more tricky for us because we have certain legal obligations we need to make sure we fulfill. But so yeah, and obviously the unique value proposition is just making sure you find your niche and try and get that right. Bring you back to Kevin.
Thanks, Aidan, for that.
No problem.
Okay, that's great. I'm just wondering, hopefully you can see the screen again there, guys. It's just, thanks for that, Aidan. It's great to reiterate those things. And these are all, I will touch on a few more of these aspects. Again, all these slides will be made available. But for a lot of students will go on to develop the plan for this current program. Obviously, objectives will be an important part of that. Now, they are going to be flexible. You will adapt them. And this is just a simple idea, but perhaps cash flow, you'll have your objective 3 months, maybe neutral, 6 months to have a cash reserve to cover 3 months of average outflows. And after 12 months, maybe 6 months reserves. We're going to have a special session on cash flow, so I'm not going to go detail on it, of course. Obviously, revenues, I was just speaking to a friend of mine who's in the Mexican burrito business, basically. He's got a chain of those all over the country. And he's saying, well, we went straight into delivery. So we've lost, we might be at X percent, we might be at half of what we were, but we haven't, it's a little bit easier to kick on if, as opposed to a total shutdown. But if this will obviously be adapted, are you going to be at 40% revs after 3 months? Is it 60%, 12 months? Just to build that in. And obviously it's constantly going to evolve with the economic climate. But it's just more signposts and milestones, to keep yourself along the way. I mentioned innovation, the test pilot. That's just that idea that I think we do need to embed, as much as change can be uncomfortable. I think it's really, really good to reach out for that help, to reach out for that younger, maybe that young, perhaps that younger person, not like me, but someone who's that younger nephew or family member or cousin or someone or graduate who's got that fresh thinking, because sometimes it's that new blood that can just go, well, this is what we do on Instagram. This is this is the key thing we're influencers on TikTok. This is what we follow, these video bloggers. It's good to sometimes get out of that little circle, but obviously whatever objectives you have, we've heard the SMART idea before, but it does make sense that they are strategic, to increase employment numbers from 10 to 12 after 3 months to 15 to 20. Why? Because it's specific, it's direct, and it's measurable, because what gets measured gets done. Measured in terms of click-through rate for your online ads, in terms of the number of followers and engagements you have across your social media platforms, that's a really big thing that we're going to, it's great to measure that. And there are companies out there that can probably measure it better than we can. The likes of the HubSpots and Salesforce of this world. Attainable, obviously be realistic. That's important. Be relevant. There's no point having objectives that aren't. This could be even, maybe again, to liaise to relevant when we mentioned sustainability, energy, water, waste, to maybe to cut waste levels. For example, the average restaurant waste between food waste is between 20 and 24,000 a year. Like, that's massive just in that industry alone. So you could see how having steps to, obviously practical steps to removing waste would be really, really important. Just one second, guys. There's someone chat coming in. Okay, great. Just a couple of more slides before I know we're going to get into Q&A in a few minutes. This is something over the next while to consider as your business model. Your value proposition we've had, what value do we offer? But tomorrow, the guys will be looking at resource and capabilities, which is the value chain, the steps along from plate to customer, if it was a restaurant, from idea to post follow up on the consumer, or if it's B2B, to relate to that relationship management element. Obviously, the revenue model, you're going to need to consider that. Can I enhance value? Perhaps subscription, we call it recurring revenue, is a massive idea now in business. This could revamp your business model, especially B2B people listening today. Recurring revenue is massive, meaning that's what Netflix obviously and all these rely on, but that's what Salesforce do, exactly, all of these guys. But if you can get subscription service, even that coffee business, the Badger and Dodo coffee, supplying people to have a 12-month subscription service for coffee lovers. Like, there's simple things we can do, that's that. And food, there are food lovers or whatever lover, whatever idea, they will subscribe. People are fanatics. You need to understand your buyers, I think. There's a couple of more slides there on reviewing your business model. Is it, it can, in terms of staffing and operations, that's something you're going to cover, but just something when we're talking about development, you can look at, double jobbing or looking at in-house versus outsourcing, and your rent and your subscription services. That's something we'll be covering over the next couple of weeks. But is your current business model resilient? But I just want to move on to customer experience, because I think it's really, really important. And this is probably one of the last things I'll do. Customer experience is, how do I offer a memorable customer experience? Okay, it's CX, sometimes called UX, user experience, if it's a website. Think, if it's a B2B, think of your website. What's the experience from the customer, from the very start to the end, to the payment, if there's a payment facility. If not, start working with a payment provider. Expectations are higher than before. People expect better, and they will retweet if they don't like something. Put the customer at the center. And there's a very good report on this. It's a PwC report. Again, I'll make that available, and that can help you along your way as you do your plan over the next couple of steps. Just a couple of slides more on that. The buyer behavior consumer, because sometimes it's not a consumer, it's a business customer as such. Some new habits will persist. Reach out to these customers, reach out to these clients, get close to them. What do they want? Do they want better variety? Do they want responsiveness? Do they want smaller, personalized service if it's a B2B? What can you, if you're in the insurance or financial industry with fintech, how is financial technology going to change your clients? Look at the buyer behavior. What are they looking at? Don't just look at demographics, meaning age groups and gender, and that's okay, but I think it's better to look at, what do people want? What are, looking at behaviors like first-time buyers or regular users, or people who want authenticity, or trust, and get that emotional connection with the customer. That's the umbilical cord, I think, here that we need. So just on reflection, what are my buyers? This is important stuff to ask. What are my buyers' behaviors and motives? Get close to them. And you map your purchase journey from the very start of researching something. It's a bit like when you try to book a flight with an airline or with booking.com, they keep, your flights have increased over €20. They're contacting you all the time in the journey. And then after your stay, they're reviewing and then telling you that people liked your review. So it's a holistic, I think the holistic approach is on your journey is important. Look at the touch points, where the customer interacts with your business, your brand, and what drives that experience. And then you need to move the needle on that. If someone comes to your website, how long did they spend on? Why didn't they purchase? Push the needle. Can you encourage them? And this is where we might need help. That's tomorrow's class. We might need help in terms of having that capability, the marketing capabilities, the customer relationship management insights to get the customers to that point of where they will sign up, or they will, the client, will subscribe. Obviously, using mobile and social is really good. We know that it's cliched, but it's what especially young men, and the wider population use. Simple point at the end there. Can I build magic moments? It doesn't always have to be technical. We have a wide variety of businesses here today. Magic moments, turning moments into memories. That's a famous idea from the hospitality sector. Can I build magic moments? And that's what's memorable. Wow, a little gift, a little thing in a gift pack, something that people go, I wasn't expecting it, and I will comment on it. That's magic moments, delighting the customer. I think that's really, really important. There's a little bit there about new markets. I'm not going to new segments. I'll leave it there for you guys. And we're just recapping on innovation. And you can build your buyer persona, build new personas, build a motivation and what they're concerned with. You can give them a name and an age or whatever, but it's always a good thing to profile any new clients. Well, I'm going to go for a bigger client now. But they're looking for innovation and assurance and speed and whatever. What can I offer those people? So this could be a client, doesn't have to be a person. This could be a business, be B2B as well. Okay, so that's really it from my point. But just to finish, I did put something about relationships. I think that's a good thing to think about. We've already covered it. The last point is your own personal stuff. Develop your own capacity to work smarter. We can have fatigue with this, war room fatigue. We need to preserve. The goal is to be stronger, longer. Again, Aaron Katie mentioned that. It's you have your own life outside of this business. That's where we need help along the way and to balance that out. So I'm going to listen. It's always great to listen, and it's great to even take part in activities such as this, because it will develop everything. Act collectively. That's really where I am at the moment. So I'll hand you back to the team here, and we'll be open for questions and answers. Thank you for listening.
Aidan and Kevin, thank you so much. Those are fantastic presentations. Aidan, your story is very emotional and it connects with people. We've had so much feedback through in the last few minutes. So I'll go to those comments now in a few seconds. And Kevin, that is a fantastic resource for the website that all of the participants will appreciate. We've had a number of queries in this morning about content, so that's fantastic that we'll be able to share this shortly with everybody. So thank you so much. I'd like to invite you both in now for some Q&A. I'll start with a couple of the comments that have come in. Just to say as well that we are taking questions on YouTube as well, and we do have a feature there available, and Anthony is monitoring that in the background, so we will get to your questions. So we have just a nice comment here from Jenny. Kevin, excellent presentation, so much to inspire and positive aspects here. Thank you. So thank you so much. That's from Jenny Beresford. And then we have a comment also from Simon Conan Cashels, and he just says, I'm really enjoying today's module. Thank you very much, Simon. And then in the questions, we have a question here from Welsh Andy. Andy, thank you so much for your question. Great to have you with us again today. So there's a question for Aidan. How have you dealt with the aggressive approach to big players in the beer market? The likes of Diageo and Heineken have made concerted efforts to bully or pressurize the small breweries. How would you apply this ethos to other businesses looking at dealing with competition?
So it's certainly an ongoing challenge. Obviously, those two companies have stranglehold on the beer market. How we deal with it is I suppose it's a combination of things. First thing I suppose I have to say is we've always been very fortunate that we've received a lot of really good support from the trade. So from, for example, pub owners, restaurant owners, shop owners, etc. And it's those people we have to really thank for the success of craft beer. They could probably run their businesses quite successfully without the need for Galway Hooker or any other craft beer, but they do, because as I suppose I mentioned earlier, they're small businesses and we're a small business, and I think they can empathize with our position, and and small business owners tend to be quite independent and fiery, and they don't like being under the thumb of anyone else. So so it's sort of a, like I say, symbiotic relationship. So in terms of, I suppose, translating that into maybe other sectors, I think it's really all about trying to find a product that your customers want. I mean, Kevin went through some really good kind of tactical and strategic steps to go through in that process, but really, you know, it's all about having the right product that people want. And if you can do that, and you can build a good relationship with customers, whether it's business to business or business customer, then you know, generally everything else will look after itself. And also, you know, not to be intimidated by the big players. To, you know, maybe, you know, it would have been very easy to think how, and a question we were often asked was, you know, when we were starting off, was like, what are you thinking? How do you think you can compete with Guinness and Heineken? I mean, don't be ridiculous. But you have to, you know, maybe you have to be a bit crazy. You just have to believe it's possible. And that would be my advice.
Okay, that's great. And just on that point there, in terms of the product, how much of a impact would you say the product plays in that whole story with regards to competition?
Well, the product's crucial. I mean, obviously, if the product's not right, you know, if the product's not right and you get everything else right, it's you know, it's gonna be a flop. So it is all about getting the product right, but also it's about, maybe there's an element of perhaps having to explain what your product is. So, you know, I suppose one of the challenges we had at the beginning was people didn't know what craft beer was. So when they tasted Galway Hooker for the first time, they were kind of wondering, you know, what's wrong with it? Why doesn't it taste like Heineken? There's something, you know, it looks like Heineken, but it doesn't taste like Heineken. So there was a bit of education required, you know, on our part to get over that initial hurdle. But once we did, you know, people really got a taste for it, and you know, got a strong following. So, but yeah, if you don't have a product, nothing else matters.
Okay, that's wait to come on here. So we have a question from an anonymous attendee. Can you sell beer online?
So there's, we're looking into it at the moment. I don't have all the answers right now. The short answer is yes. The long answer is it's complicated. It's not. It's a bit more complicated than, you know, selling something else. So there are restrictions. Obviously, you have to make sure you comply with all of, you know, in terms of making sure that people, you know, whoever buys it's over 18. And there are also revenue restrictions in terms of the volume that we're allowed to sell and licensing issues. But provided you jump through all those hoops, it's possible.
Okay, and a follow-on question as well. Thank you for your presentation, Aidan. You mentioned an online shop. Can you sell beer online? So you've just answered that one there. So thank you so much for your questions, everyone. We are taking questions on YouTube as well, and some directly as well. So that's great. We're getting to everything. This is a question now for both. I'll just find it here. So it was in terms of, can you share, a question from Simon. I'm wondering if you can share some examples of traditional industrial brands who have successfully pivoted from business to consumer. Most examples of this refer to consumer brands, food, coffee, etc. In our industry, the buying process is still relatively conservative, with products sold through an established dealer network. So I'd like to invite you both in for that one. I think that's a really good question, Simon. Thank you so much.
Just the question, if I understand it correctly, is it going from business to business online, or business direct? Setting up a shop on the two tiers.
Yep. So it's industrial brands who have successfully pivoted from B2B to B2C. So business to business to business to consumer. And then question about established dealer network. So is there any sort of pivoting or sway in that at the moment?
Well, I think I presume most businesses have at least if they were business to business, a lot of them will have presumably have an online presence where maybe it's possible to buy online. I off the top of my head, I can't think of any particular brands that might have done it. I'm sure lots have. Sorry.
I'll come in on that one. If you look at the likes of even Starbucks, Costa Coffee, they were B2B. They were businesses supplying, other businesses, not consumers. Starbucks started out supplying the hospitality industry. So they pivoted towards B2C as well. As Costa Coffee famously, that's one of their USPs is their roasting business. But they moved into consumer later. Tesla, another one, instead of dealing with dealerships, they sell direct as well to the consumer. So to me, there are pivots from manufacturing from B2B to B2C. Even perhaps even look at General Electric did it as well, moving into consumer finance from more of an industrial background. It can be done, but you are moving out of you are, as you say, pivoting towards a new market and a new element of diversification there, which isn't always the easiest. Even the likes, even Boots, which is owned by a wholesaler, Alliance Unichem. So they're moving from B2B, supplying hospitals with drugs, to actually owning Boots, which is So there are pivots, but it's maybe a little bit easier for the bigger guys to do that. The smaller guys certainly could do it, but it's a challenge.
Well, I suppose just one other thing I suppose one would want to be careful about as well is if you're selling business to business and that is your business, and suddenly you bypass your wholesaler and start selling directly to customers, you're suddenly have become your customers' competitors, and that is something you need to be very careful about and give a lot of thought to.
Okay, that's a great point. Thank you so much, Aidan. So we have another comment here, lovely comment from Joe Collins. Welcome back, Joe. Great to have you with us again today. Good morning. Enjoying Kevin's energy and enthusiasm. Thank you. I definitely agree with that. That was very engaging. Another question here from Peter. Peter Carroll, really appreciate you giving up your time. Great tips, and thanks for sharing the information and slides. So thanks so much, Peter. If you have a question, feel free to share it with us. We will read it out. And then from Anthony, thanks for asking your question earlier, Anthony. Really enjoying the course so far, some very insightful advice. So just to recap again, we will be sharing all of the resources on the website shortly afterwards. There's a question here from Joe Collins. My business was 100% based on face-to-face meetings with clients, and I'm now transferring to online consultancy and training. To help customers, I was happy to share my expertise, for which I did, but now I need to focus on generating revenue, which is challenging when there are so many excellent quality free services available to people. I'm open to any suggestions that you have.
I can take that.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's a real challenge. I have friends in the financial service sector and the insurance sector, and they're telling me they're down in the country. They develop on dealing with farmers, dealing with small business owners. He's involved in pensions and investments, but he's just telling me that's his business. His business has always been the human side, and it's very difficult. I know this is a slightly different context, but to go from that to this more online experience where there's free, I would say go gentle with them, and say, look, here's a plan, here's a program, here's a 10 steps, the freemium, which means the first steps are free and the rest you'll pay for. So I think the freemium strategy, that's generally how businesses work. I think there's an element of goodwill where people say you can't get everything for free. But so I would give them a taster and a teaser and a couple of sessions saying, look, there is going to be a loss leader though, because some of them you won't convert. So that's one of the objectives. I'd look at that churn rate of how many people the initial clients will subscribe, because I think you want that recurring revenue. That's your bread and butter, but it is a challenge. But offer, going back to the first question that Andy said, personalize, offer, say, look, I'm offering a little bit different. I'm bespoking it to suit you because I'm small and I can kind of do that. So to offer service, because you can't always compete in price to some extent, but it's the speed and the service and the human element that hopefully people will sign up for whatever business or product.
Okay, thanks very much, Kevin. We have a question from YouTube here from Susan Madden. Thank you so much, Susan, for your question. Kevin, do you have an ideal timeline for when you kill it within this period for recalibration?
Well, that's a really interesting one. Like I talked to, as I said, just last night, I was speaking to a friend of mine who runs the marketing agency in Temple Bar, and he said to me, look, don't be afraid to kill an idea within a day. Don't let it fester. If you know, that might be an anathema to some people, but he is more of a constant innovate, try it, does it work, drop it. Obviously, I think for Aidan will be able to come in on this, that with new flavors and new innovations, it'll probably be a longer thing, and you might want to make sure you have your focus group and your surveys and probably a wider. But I suppose it will depend, and that's the timeline. Some will take. I think it's a day, one day, but others it'll be more of a week to a month. But I certainly wouldn't persist with something if it's not gaining traction, because it is a challenging time. We don't really have any. We can't really be riding too many horses that aren't going to generate the revenue. So remember the attention thing. If you focus your attention on those things that are generating the revenue, personally, I think, but trying to improve or innovate where necessary. I defer to Aidan, especially on this one.
Well, I suppose, to answer that, you probably want to have some idea of context. So, how much resources is it taking up? Is it costing you money to keep the idea alive? If it's just sitting there, if it doesn't, if it's not having a negative impact on you keeping it going, then maybe keep it going. See how it goes. If you're losing money and it's not performing as you hoped, I'd be inclined to exit pretty quickly. My experience, just my own personal experience in these things, is generally things continue the way they start. So if it doesn't go that well at the beginning, it's unlikely to turn. Not to say it couldn't happen, but generally things continue on the same path. So if it goes well at the start, it probably will continue to do well, and vice versa. But that's just my experience. It depends on what the idea is. If how much you've put into it, how much you have to continue to put into it to keep it going.
Okay, thank you very much, Aidan. We have a question here about the Four Horsemen, your latest venture, and it's online. Can you give us some insight into how that came about? And yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose actually going back to the point Kevin made in his presentation, which was felt really good. He did mention the need to bring in young or new blood into business, and I feel like that was something we needed to do. I'd been running the business for 15 years. I'm in my mid-40s now. Craft beer is a very kind of it's a very trendy thing. So trying to keep up to date with all the trends, it's hard. So we brought in a couple of new people last year, and I kind of gave them free rein to come up with a concept and an idea and a new product. So they went off and they developed this. They teamed up with a group of graphic artists in Dublin called Subset. I'm familiar with them. They're really talented. So they did the artwork. So the concept was that there would be a 4-pack, 4 different beers. I don't have any with me, but there would be a different label on each of the 4 beers. So the Four Horsemen was the name of the beer. As in the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. So we'd an image of Donald Trump in one bottle, Putin on a second bottle, Theresa May, who was Prime Minister at the time, on the 3rd bottle, and him on the 4th bottle. So it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek, bit of fun beer, but yeah, it's proved quite popular. So it's a bit different.
That's great. I have heard of Subset. It's like a kind of a Dublin version of Banksy a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really, really very, very talented.
Yeah, they don't reveal their identity though. But but maybe they did to you, who knows. But anyway, in terms of the taste of that beer, is it radically different from Galway Hooker?
So it's what we call a session IPA. It's different in that it wasn't filtered or pasteurized, so that would have allowed some more flavors to come through. Some more of those hop flavors, so more a little bit more fruity, a little bit more kind of tropical fruit hop flavors coming through, whereas say Galway Hooker Irish Pale Ale would have more kind of a balanced flavor, so it would have those hop flavors but also have some of the malty kind of biscuity flavors coming through as well. So yeah, they're different, but you know, subtly different.
Okay. There's a question here from Alan Green. Can you give some examples of feedback channels, particularly for business to business? So invite Kevin in on that one as well.
Thanks, Michael. Feedback channels, I suppose there are many different routes. LinkedIn, obviously, the social media avenues for business is massive, you know, and that's you know, there's so much going on there, the community that it is. Obviously, there's forums, there's industry forums. You know, you're going to find out about your feedback. You obviously on your website you can host testimonials. That's another option. Obviously, looking at third-party sites, perhaps where there's a review element. These are different. Even perhaps having a YouTube channel and having, you know, putting up an example of your consultancy or whatever it is, and see the comments. So there's more casual feedback channels and there's more formal ones as well. So it's certainly a little bit more different in B2C, which is B2C. It's easier to get the consumer. But reaching out, getting that personal feedback. Obviously, you could survey your business clients to find out how they felt about it. That's another option to get for a feedback channel. A little bit difficult now because we haven't got the human element. We're not meeting people at events and conferences, so that is a definite challenge. Again, maybe hosting a Zoom session. You know, you could be proactive there and host something like that to get feedback. But there'll be a number of channels available, but different in this era, definitely.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks so much, Kevin. Kevin, another question for you from Brendan Cairns. Thank you very much, Brendan, for your question. Kevin, you mentioned online events. Can you give us some examples of such events?
Online events. Well, you could have an online meetup. You know, I know there's meetup.com where people get together and do a wine tasting, whatever else, language, whatever. You can have online events. You know, I think that's you know, online. I think that's going to become more and more, and we're going to see more players in the market for that. You know, I think that could work. You know, a live streaming event like what we're doing today. I don't see why companies couldn't go in there. I think later on the marketing people will be able to touch in on that side. You know, in getting ideas from customers, launching a live campaign here, guys. But getting customers involved is a good idea. You know, saying, look, we're going to launch a new product over there. What would you like us to improve? Or, you know, get suggestions for ideas, you know, for new flavors or for new innovations. That's something you can do with customers, and young people especially love to suggest new designs and new things. So I believe in open innovation sometimes, you know, I don't believe in a closed model. So those events could be, if that's what you mean by events in terms of generating ideas, definitely. And generating a viral, because you want to buzz around your marketing as well, don't you? You don't want it to be internal.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, there's a question here from Barnabas. Thanks so much, Barnabas. Welcome back. Thank you, Kevin and Aidan, for the wonderful presentation and experience. This question for Kevin. I love the passion you put out in your business. My friend runs a packaged water business, bottled water and sachet water in Nigeria, but his greatest challenge has been getting the right staff to run his business when he's away. Sometimes he closes down the business while he's on transit and reopens whenever he's around. His fear has always been there will not be anyone to manage his business well when he is away and might end up damaging his machines due to past experience. I believe you must have had this type of challenge or experience something similar with getting the right staff or employees to work with. And as a small business owner, how did you deal with such issues? Thanks so much for that question, Barnabas.
It's a very, very interesting question. It's a good question. like obviously, just again from my own experience, it's sometimes serendipity. Sometimes the more people, it's someone literally can come off the street and say, look, and present themselves in front of you. I've heard that before. I've seen my people I know who've handed the reins over to people they trust, but sometimes it just happens. The more interactions we have, the more with people, the more we get to feel for them and their competence and their trust, as opposed to just hiring externally all the time as a manager and it doesn't work. But there is a trust element with running a business, to hand it over to, and Aidan will be able to come in later on this, that, you know, to whether I can do that, and there's a comfort zone with that. But I definitely think it's essential. I know there's machinery and valuables, but I think it's about trusting, but it's getting human instinct for a person. But they have to have a certain competence level and enthusiasm, and then you got to go with it. I think you have to, because you're always going to be stuck if you don't. Because you just can't manage your time. You can't really run a business long term, I don't think, and grow that way. You'll stay in a lower level. So I completely feel that man's difficulties. But I would go with my gut, because that's your best intuition for decision making on people. What was the second part of that question, Michael? Sorry, there was a second part to it.
So it was about how do you find the correct sort of employees to manage while you're away?
Yeah. Was there a little adjunct to that? No, there was a small little thing at the end.
So having a look here.
Okay.
It's fair that yeah, managing the business while he's away, and who would be the right person to do that, because there might be a damage to the machines.
Yeah, I just think go with trust, go with competence, develop. I think when you train within, when you develop within, I think Aidan probably be able to tell you this. That's the best type of development. Trust people; they will respond to that. Empower people. You've got to, that was certainly my advice. Aidan, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's actually a really good question, actually. And it's a huge challenge for, I think, any small business, sort of, say a one-man operation or two-man, anything like that. And indeed, it's a problem we've faced in the past, and it sounds like a similar enough business in a sense. I think what Kevin said, you have to let go of the reins, you have to bring someone in, and you just have to train them. And I suppose you stay with them for as long as it takes until you're comfortable that they can look after the plant while you're away. But you can't do it all on your own all the time, or you'll burn out and you won't have time to do other things. So but it's one of the big challenges and disadvantages of small business. It's really, really hard when you don't have multiple people who can do one job. We have one guy who does our deliveries in Galway, so when he's out, we've one guy who does the brewing when he's out. We've only one person who does every job, and it's always the big challenge to fill those gaps. But it's just, look, you have to find the person and train them up, and that's it.
Okay, and Aidan, sometimes you might hear people saying that now is a good time to maybe think about starting up a business. So what sort of supports do you think would be available to businesses or to entrepreneurs that would want to maybe set up a business, whether it's brewing or distilling or anything like that? What sort of supports would you recommend?
So first thing is you will get lots of support. From go to your local enterprise board, or whatever the local agency is that's there to help. That would probably be your first port of call. But anyone, or not, the vast majority of people who are in business, and the business you're thinking about entering, would be more than happy to talk to you, give you their advice, give you their feedback. Whatever it is you're thinking about doing, if you're thinking about opening an ice cream shop, talk to other people who have ice cream shops, ask them where they get their ingredients, ask them the margins, what kind of volumes they need to do to make it work. It's just talking to as many people as you can get to in that particular industry, and you'll be amazed. People will be very open and helpful. And there's, generally you're talking to people who've been through it before, and other people have helped them up the ladder, so they'll be more than happy to return the favor back to you.
Okay, Kevin, would you like to come in on that?
Could you just recap what the focus of that one? again, Michael?
In terms of some of the supports that might be available.
Oh, supports.
Sorry. Yeah.
There's plenty of supports. Like, I think that's the one, the government is trying to bend over backwards literally to say, look, this SME funding was announced, and no, that's not fully panned out yet, the 2 billion funding. There's the Restart grant, which may apply to some people, of €10,000. It's the deferral of tax payments. There's a lot of there, there's leeway there. So obviously the LEO grants, certainly. These are all, who knows, perhaps even a crowdfunding campaign. Remember I mentioned about going local again. Perhaps you say, look, guys, I'd love you to support me on my journey. There are different ways, but certainly at a national level and a local level, there's plenty. There seems to be, it's not plenty, but there seems to be, a broader range of supports than were made available to hopefully get us through this next 6 months. Then we can. So it's about riding that horse of cash flow, stability, and then growth as well. Which is a challenge, but certainly there are supports there now.
Okay, that's brilliant. I'm sure that'll be very helpful for all the attendees, and we might share some of those links. So just to recap, we will be sharing all of the presentations from today and the videos shortly after the webinar on our website. The videos will also be on YouTube. We do invite you to engage with us through social media using the hashtag Reboot2020, and look out for the content there that's being shared at the moment, and do feel free to engage with us as well. Myself and Geraldine running the program, we can be contacted through email, that's on the website, and also we've already responded to a few of you, so we do get back to all queries. We have gotten through all of the Q&A, so if there are any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we will cover those. So with that said, I'd like to thank everyone for participating today in today's session. I'd like to thank the speakers, Aidan Murphy, from the CEO and founder of Galway Brewing Company, and also Kevin O'Hara, who's part of the team here in Griffith, and also a business entrepreneur. I'd like to thank Geraldine, Sinead, Anthony, and Sean as well, part of the team on this project, and working away in the background seamlessly. Today's session talked about what do I want to develop, and tomorrow's session is going to talk about the how am I going to develop. So it's a really nice stepping stone from this webinar to the next one. So I'd like you to look out for our resources, do download the workbook and engage, and we hope that it'll be useful to you throughout this series. So without any further ado, I'd just like to say thank you to the speakers today. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for everyone in the team.
And take care and stay well, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning at 10:30.